you awakening wonders. Thanks for joining me on this voyage to truth and freedom. If you're one of the 6.5 million watching us on YouTube right now, click the link in the description and join us in the home of truth, because Vandana Shiva is coming. Vandana Shiva, world teacher, Indian scholar, environmental activist, but from a perspective of liberating actual people, not punishing people, not penalizing ordinary people while allowing centralist, globalist authority to continue to thrive. Vandana Shiva is one of the most radical voices in contemporary politics. She knows what Bill Gates is really doing, and she's willing to talk about it. She knows what Monsanto have done. Vandana Shiva is a world teacher, a potential world leader. She believes in decentralization of power, devolution. She recognizes that there is a constant threat of calling people conspiracy theorists because they're speaking out against establishment power. We spoke at our live event community. You've got to join us next time. We talked about how big business are destroying the environment, then blaming you. We spoke about food fascism, industrialization of our food, and why big data is the new oil. This is a fantastic conversation. Let me know in the comments if this is the first time you're seeing Vandana Shiva, and let me know if, like me, you believe this is exactly the kind of voice we need in politics to change the world right now. I'm joined now by Vandana Shiva at Community. Vandana Shiva, as I usually refer to her, is, I believe, a world teacher. We're today, of course, going to talk about a variety of subjects. First, I'd like to thank you for your presence, Vandana.
My joy. I'm here for Community. I'm here for you, Russell.
Thank you for coming, and thank you for this beautiful gift. Would you tell me once more how this gift was made and what this is I'm wearing?
Well, cotton was a colonial fiber. The empire was a cotton empire. And then we fought it with hand spinning and hand weaving and the charkha that Gandhi brought out. But Monsanto took control of the seed and increased the costs, totally unreliable, couldn't control pests, not resilient to drought, and it kept failing. Farmers got into debt. Indebted farmers committed suicide. So the cotton belt, which became a Monsanto GMO cotton belt, became a belt of suicide. So, of course, that hurt, propelled me to act. So I found old cotton seed, old varieties, helped the farmers grow organic, get rid of the chemicals, get rid of the GMOs. And then we worked with the Khadi ashrams, with the Gandhi ashrams, where they hand spin and hand weave. And this is organic cotton, hand spun, hand woven, and hand dyed with vegetable dyes. So at every step it's non-violent, and we call it the fiber of freedom.
Thank you. In a sense, Vandana, this piece of fabric is embodies many of the principles that need to be practiced in order to overcome these gargantuan entities of domination that first dominated your nation and in the colors of national imperialism and now appear to be masked by logo. We still confront the same problem. Human beings cannot have a relationship with nature, land and one another, it seems, increasingly, without the intercedence of this corporate power. Just you describing this seemed like a minor miracle that, oh wow, seeds that prior to the time where seeds were patented, dyes prior to these processes becoming industrialized. And I'm not naive about the power of technology and the power of industry, but I am deeply concerned about the mentality behind it and the inherent disregard for nature, both human nature and nature more broadly, which I know you would say are not distinct. In this country right now, there is a lot of awareness, and I think this is true around the world in the wake of the East Palestine disaster in the United States of America, with the way that industry and industrial practices are negatively impacting the world. Where I live, the River Thames is continually polluted, and I can't help but think this is in part because the companies that own Thames Water now are financed and owned in places like Canada and Abu Dhabi, and I believe in part in China. What happens when corporations are able to own things that don't seem like they should even be primarily regarded as resources, like water and nature and land? What happens to us spiritually, and what happens ecologically?
Well, I think all of nature's gifts that are vital to survival of all life, human life, as well as the life of other beings, the water, the air, the oceans, and actually till British imperialism, the land was a commons. They were always held in 1789, I think it was Lord Cornwallis says, all the soil of India is British property. And therefore the peasants of India had to pay a tax to the British, and they starved to death while Britain made $45 trillion out of the exploitation. So the reason nature herself is either treated as a mine or a dump, and rivers and water are treated as mines to take out the water out of the flow and a dump for the waste. So the privatization of rivers is the extractivism out of the river, but also the dumping of the waste. But we're sitting next to the River Wye, and from what I understand, the chicken farms, but the chicken farms were not imagined by the peasants or the farmers of this area. They have been designed by Cargill, the world's biggest grain trader, the remotest area on an island in Philippines. The chicken is owned by Cargill. The feed is supplied by Cargill. The chemicals and the antibiotics are supplied by Cargill. And all the waste is thrown into the commons of the river. The interesting thing is for why, even though there's columns in Guardian that recognize that Cargill, the world's biggest corporation in agriculture, has a role, there are paid journalists in the Guardian who talk about, the farmers, it's all the farmers. And this total criminalization of farmers is ethically and ecologically wrong. First, if the drivers are the corporations, you have the guts to fight the corporations. You don't target the victims. The farmers are victims in this system. And the second is, you do not pick particularly vulnerable people at a time where we desperately need farmers to take care of the earth, to take care of the rivers, to take care of our food, to grow good food, to try and destroy the link between today and the future, between the earth and us.
Vandana, how is it that farmers have become increasingly vilified, even when there are farm protests in Sri Lanka and India and Germany and England and the Netherlands? How is it that there appears to be a global uprising and activism movement in agriculture, and the simultaneous, as you say, media smearing of people that are, of farmers? Why is that happening? And why is it happening in such a particular way, Vandana? Why are we hearing of farmers and this movement against what appears to be the increasing industrialization, centralization, and globalization of agriculture as being a right-wing idea? How can it be right-wing? Even for speaking about it myself, I've been accused of peddling right-wing messaging, but it doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand it.
I've written many papers and books on food fascism. And fascism was, of course, how Mussolini defined it, the convergence of economic and political power. And food fascism is the recent control over our food systems by giant corporations and the billionaires. Because earlier the British controlled the land, but they didn't control the food. It's with globalization and the green revolution and industrialization of food that the corporations control food. And I remember when I was organizing protests against the GATT and WTO, we shut down WTO in Seattle, but I remember 500,000 farmer protests in India. And there's this sea of farmers saying, food and agriculture is too precious to be left to the greed of free trade. It must be kept in the hands of the farmers. So food sovereignty came as the call, as opposite to the food dictatorship and food fascism. And if you look now, that same system wants to industrialize further remove people from the land, farming without farmers, further industrialize agriculture, put more energy. Recent calculations are showing that the footprint of this lab food that they want to push as a solution to climate change is 25 times more than conventional agriculture. Yeah? So they're taking a destructive alternative, but from the beginning of colonialism, removing the people's ability to sustain themselves and provide for themselves is the first step of the empire, first step of fascism. And separation from nature is where it begins. But destruction of the farmers who work with the land, because I have realized it increasingly, you want to make an automobile, you will have to go somewhere for aluminium, somewhere else now for lithium and cobalt and all of that. You'll have to travel around the world. But if I'm a peasant, or if I'm a gardener, I work with the soil, I have a little bit of seed, I give my love and my knowledge, the sun shines and does the photosynthesis. It's the only truly independent production system. And it's the freedom that they want to attack. They are afraid, not just afraid of freedom, but they are challenged by it, because this system is so much more humane, so much more ecological, so much more light-footed, that they want to put their false solutions by saying the farmers are to blame, get rid of them. Because as long as they're farmers, we'll have food.
Ah, I see. They have to destroy and discredit farmers by calling them fascists and right-wing, and anybody who facilitates that is essentially doing the work of these globalists.
They're the fascists. See, the fascists want to...
The people that wrote those articles are the fascists.
And they're taking a thing and projecting it to the farmer.
I see.
And I think all we need to do is recognize how fascism works.
Yes. Yes.
And, you if you want to be... I call this journalist who's been used for making this language, I call him the Nescafe expert of food. Just like you have filter coffee that filters slowly. The farmer's wisdom filters beautifully. I've given 40 years of my life to trying to understand the food system. 2 years ago, he was on a Zoom conference with me. And he says, well, I've received 2,000 papers, and now I'm going to start to read them. And now I'll write a book called Regenesis. And I said, in 2 years, reading a few books. And you might remember we had a very beautiful saint called Kabir. I don't know if you came across him. Kabir was a weaver, and he had a big following in Banaras. And the Hindus came and the Muslims came to him. He was actually a Muslim weaver. And the people said, how is it that, the mullahs in the mosques and the priests in the temples don't convince us of the path to God? And you speak, and we know what that path is. And he said something which we all need to remember. In Hindi, he said, "Wo kehte aankhon kagaz ki leke, hum kehte aankhon ki de." They speak from the word they have read, often the propaganda word fed by the corporations who want to get rid of the farmer. And I speak from my experience and in life. And so those of us who are defending the earth and farmers, and the earth will not be defended without those who will take care of her. And the only caretakers in the world, everywhere, are farmers. To try and destroy them means you really want to also create new conquests of the earth, new colonization of the earth.
It's beautiful how you've described it and defined it and helped me to understand it as, in a sense, a project of colonization to smear farmers as fascists, to disempower them, to break the link between people and the land, so this too can become colonized, industrialized, globalized, and centralized. Often when I think of globalism, I think of it as being vast and all-encompassing, which of course it is, but also it is tiny, and it intercedes in the tiny relationships between human beings and the relationships between people who work with the soil and the soil itself, almost as if there can be no intimacy between human beings and the land, almost as if nature itself can be patented, remedied, broken down, and destroyed. Thank you for helping me to understand that. One of the things you've helped me to understand also is that our models of colonialism and imperialism have migrated from recognizably models that are underwritten by nationalism, identifiable figures of empire, the crown, the flag, into rather more diffuse and difficult to map monoliths. I understand now, because it's 20 or so years since the names have become familiar to us, thanks in no small part to your great work in spreading this message, the power of companies like Monsanto, the havoc that they have wreaked. But even now, to talk of someone like Bill Gates and it's odd to say billionaire class because you need a few more people to create a class, and it's such a tiny cadre of individuals, are able to exert, it seems to me at least, a disproportionate, extraordinarily high amount of power on agriculture, on world health, not least through the World Health Organization, and have had an ability historically and recently, they have the capacity to direct policy in areas that's very, very surprising. How have we found ourselves in this position, and what can we do to address it, again, without being regarded as conspiracy theorists? Because I know even the subjects that we're discussing already, the smearing of farmers, that's right-wing and fascist to speak about the rights of farmers and to stand up for their causes. And now when you speak about billionaires, what might be the sort of centripetal force of this globalism, if you talk about that, people say you're a conspiracy theorist. How are these conversations being closed down? First of all, I suppose I'm asking you, what is the role of, let's take, for example, Bill Gates, because he seems like the best example, and how can we speak about it plainly and with facts so that it's not regarded as conspiratorial or crackpot?